All right, everybody. Today we are going to be going over our fishing knots that we recommend. This is a two-part series. We're going to be talking about our best connection knots, so tying to a swivel or tying to a hook. And then we'll do some of our more kind of like specialty knots in our second version. So there's going to be one we're going to start out with on how to connect to a spool on a reel. And then we'll go into our connection knots and kind of how we found out the best knot you can have and kind of showing you how they all go. All right, so kind of starting out here, we're going to start out with a bigger line here, this paracord, of course, just this is for so you can kind of see how it goes. So we've got our piece of paracord here. We're going to tie just an overhand knot in the end, just like this. Then from there, we are going to go around here. Now, if this is braid, definitely must have a couple wraps of electrical tape on there so it bites in so it doesn't slip. I recommend that on all my spools. So this works on bait casters or regular spinning rods, but definitely put that on there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take our knot side or our dead end or tag end, and we're just going to tie another overhand knot right around that same main line or live end of the rope. So you end up with kind of like a slip knot, so it slips back and forth like this. Now what that does is that when we tighten it down, it's going to come up, it's going to slip all the way up to here, and then as we tighten, it will tighten up against here and actually lock itself on so it won't come off, and the secondary knot here locks into it so it can't come loose. So that makes it real easy, and the harder you pull, the tighter it gets. It's the simplest version. There's all kinds of different versions out there. You can use the uni knot version. This is the one I use, and I've felt it works really, really well. So kind of seeing that again, just so you guys can see that with some little finer rope, we're going to go ahead and tie the loop end here, or the tag end here. We're going to go ahead and tie a knot. We're going to pull that guy tight. We can go ahead and flip it off if we don't want all this on the end here. We're going to go around, and then we're just going to tie around the live end of the rope. So we're just going to tie another granny knot or a half hitch, whatever you guys want to call it. So we end up with a knot and a knot. That knot should be around it so it can slide back and forth. And as we pull down, the two knots come together. And as we pull tight, it keeps it from slipping. Okay, and like I said, this guy is just like braid, which is it will slip unless you guys put a little piece of black electrical tape on there, or any color electrical tape really, but definitely start there, okay? So once you got that on there, go ahead and get ready for our next one. Now our next set of knots, we're all done in kind of like a tug of war test. So basically what we did is we took all the knots. I went and I researched out every knot there was, put some of my knots that I've been using for years, and I basically tied them to the end of these two swivels, and I pulled them apart. So I put like the uni knot here and the clinch knot here, and I pulled them until they broke. We had one definite winner in kind of an odd situation with 12-pound rope, but across the board, this is how it went. So we're going to start out with the clinch knot. So the clinch knot is the knot that I've been tying my whole life. So that knot is we've got kind of our oversized knot here. So this is our clinch knot. We go through one time, through the loop, or through the eye of the hook there. We're going to pull out a decent little amount. We're going to go ahead and stick our finger in there. That leaves the loop open, and we're going to wrap 6 times. So that 6 times, over. Then we're going to come back around, and we're going to come up through the loop, and then we're going to drop back through the loop we just made. So the original loop come up, and then back through makes it the improved clinch knot. Now you'll see this all sometimes as a trilene knot. They just make an extra loop here, and we pull that all down. We wet it, wet it down with saliva usually, or water. I usually use saliva, and then we tighten it down. So it makes that real nice knot, has your 6 loops in there. tied in and ties down. This knot works very well up to about 20 pounds of monofilament. It does not work on a braid, and it does not work on anything bigger than really maybe 20-pound tests, and I probably wouldn't even use it above 10 pound, maybe 12 pound, because it tends to slip, which kind of brings us to our next knot. Our next knot being the double clinch knot. So this is the version if you're a clinch knot tire right now and you don't want to learn a new knot. This would be the knot I would recommend. Anything above really 12-pound test, and anything that would be where you'd be using braid. So if you have like braid on your line where you're using 50, 60-pound braid, which is what I use a lot of times on my rigs for doing salmon, this is the knot I used for a while. Okay, so our next strongest knot would be this knot. So we're just going to do the exact same thing. There's no brain surgery here at all. We're going to pull up a good little amount of rope. We're going to come through here. We're going to stick our finger back through. We have 2 lines coming through now, and we're going to wrap. And we're just going to wrap a couple times for the video, but we want to wrap at least that 6 times. Now this becomes a little harder because now we're dealing with these multiple wraps here. And it does take up a little bit more line. But we want to make sure we're going to wrap around, go around. We're going to only do 3 times because of the size of the rope. But we want to do those, like I said, that's 6. And then we're going to come around here. We're going to come around the back, come through the loop we made at the bottom, and then back through, making it the improved double clinch knot. And again, we're going to sit there and tighten that guy all down while lubing it just before we get to this point. And when we tighten it all down, you'll see the loops, and you'll see the 2 different loops on the actual main line. Make sure they don't cross over, but this is a great knot. It holds very well. All the knots we're recommending that you kind of keep on that 75% strength-wise. You've got 100-pound test. It's really about 75-pound fish we're trying to go after. And that's just my philosophy. There's no, different knot out, reason out there or anything like that. Getting into our next knot, which would be getting into our third, got 3rd place on our whole list here, is going to be the uni knot. And this actually, a variation of this is what won the whole contest, so I definitely recommend doing this. And the uni knot is a very popular knot because it's used for everything. They use double uni knots for tying braid together, things like that. This is a great knot if you're a uni knot guy. Let's say you're a bass fisherman, something like that. So we're just going to pull 1 time through. So we're going to pull it up. We're going to do a loop here and cross around both lines. So we end up with the loop and making a secondary loop here and crossing over both lines. And then we're just going to loop it through. Now again, this would be one I do 7, 8 times. We'd pull it all the way through the loop and then pull it up tight. It gives this big loop here. This is where I like to lube it here because it does have to slide all the way down to the bottom, all the way to the bottom. So that is the uni knot. And again, it's the loop and loop, loop, loop multiple times. It works very, very good. This is a great all-around knot. And if you're tying this knot, and you're keeping with that 75% efficiency rating, it works totally fine. Now, if we get into our next knot, this is probably the most popular knot out there. That everybody says the strongest knot in the world on 1,000 different forms. Ours, we saw it as our 2nd best knot as far as strength-wise. So we're going to fold over. So we want to give ourselves a nice big loop here. We're going to fold it over. So we pinch off a bite there. We're going to push the bite through the loop, come around, and this is the easiest knot in the world. You're just going to loop it around, and we're going to make ourselves an overhand loop. We go through the loop that we just made. We come out on the other end. Now this knot will slip if you don't do this, which is you have to go all the way around the item you're putting it on. So we're going to come all the way around the loop. We're going to come all the way around like this, and we're going to start tugging it up. Now this knot is best. See, I'm kind of fighting on the top here, pulling tight, pull a little bit more, because this rope here tends to tighten down and you get this loop that's loose. So you don't want to have that happen. So you want to constantly kind of be pulling it until that goes tight. And I want to leave it on the middle of the knot, so it's crushing the knot not up on top or not on the bottom, so it doesn't actually hurt her. And then we want to lube it up before we get it tight, real good, and then pull it tight. And so you end up with the double loop here. Make sure they're not crossed over. Super, super strong knot. One of my favorite knots because it's easy. If you can tie an overhand knot, you can tie this knot and you can go fishing, and it can be used for everything. You can snell knots with or snell hooks with it. You can do anything you want with the uni knot, thus the universal designation it gets. So definitely a big knot on that one as far as being able to basically use it for just about anything. Now, what knot won our test? This knot that we're about to talk about won every single time that we put it against. And remember, we're doing a tug of war. We're tying 2 on here, and we're pulling them until we break. We did that about 150 times with different knots, all the way from 6-pound all the way to 50-pound braid and 60-pound test mono. So we did fluorocarbon, regular mono, and braid. This knot fared very, very well and won every single test we did. So I really, really truthfully love this knot. And what I recommend here, what I do like about this is a little bit smaller than the Palomar knot and just stronger than all the rest of them by far. The only area we found that was kind of weird was 12-pound test line. 12-pound test line did not fare as well. It actually fared about a 50-50 with the Palomar knot. Beat everybody else, but in the Palomar knot on the 12-pound test. So I recommend, this is how easy it is to build this rig. Find your specific. I'm a P-line fan. I buy tons of P-line. If you're a whatever cigar, whatever cigar, whatever it is, you're going to be using your line. Build a little rig like this and just pull them until they see the break. On top of that, there's so much built into, if you're holding the pole properly and everything else, they tend not to break in general. So that's really important to remember. So we're going to go over this one a couple times because I feel this is the knot everybody should be tying now. It is called the modified uni knot or improved uni knot, or the fishing full knot is another popular one it's called, because everybody's got to have 5,000 names. So we're going to go through the eye of the hook once, through the eye of the hook twice, so we get 2 loops. And remember, we want to see these loops and we don't want them crossing over each other. We did see some variations how they had tied themselves over that weren't quite as strong, but overall this one worked really well. Now, like we were saying before, it is a modified uni knot. So what's the difference? That is the only difference. If you can tie a uni knot, you can tie this knot, because you're just going to go through the loop twice. So the eye of the hook or your swivel, we're going to spin it around, and we are going to tie 6 to 7 with mono. We're only going to do 3 on this one just because it's on this big heavy rope. And then we actually want to wet it here and down at the hook here before we pull, so that it actually doesn't hurt itself. So it's actually going to come through. We're going to tighten it. We're going to keep that loop going all the way down to the bottom, and then we're going to pull it tight. Now, if this is on braid, feel free to go 8 to 10 times loops. It doesn't hurt anything to go a little over on braid because braid is so slippery, but definitely an awesome knot. This one won every single time except in 12-pound test, which I thought was interesting. I did not see it winning every single time. And then we got to 12-pound tests, and I was like, oh, darn, maybe we got a real problem here. Maybe it's not as strong as I thought. But then after that, it won with the braid. It won with the, it won every braid, no matter what. Even we did a couple different weights of braid, but in the 12-pound mono, it seemed to have a little bit of tough, but I'll tell you, it was still excruciatingly strong. It just seemed like the uni knot really came out, because we did end up breaking on 12-pound tests. We ended up breaking a lot of the actual line, not the hook, not the actual knots. We were having it break on the actual line. Now, we did test to see how strong it was compared to the line, and in about 50% of the knots we tested in the 17 to 20-pound range, we were actually breaking the line when we were tying modified uni knots on both ends. So we were tying a modified uni knot here and a modified uni knot here, or fishing full, whatever you want to call it. We were pulling, and it was breaking about 50% of the time on the thing, leading me to believe it's as strong as any of the other things we were doing. So definitely very strong. So we're going to tie that again with a little bit of some thinner cord you can see here. So we're going to 1, 2 times through. It's going to go ahead. Now this is where the knot becomes a little tougher to tie. And I don't think it's as critical as I'm making it out to be that it doesn't cross over, but it does help if it's nice and straight like that. We're going to do our loop here. I tend to put both my fingers in here and spread them out so I can do my loops. So I put 2 fingers in there and I just go ahead, pull apart, and I flip it through. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then we're going to go ahead and pull it, and we're going to, wet it and pull it tight. And then we're going to, as we pull it down, we want to make sure we leave those knots over each other. Okay, so this one you're going to have to, on this particular stuff, normally on mono and on braid, it slips so easy it doesn't matter, but on this stuff we got to push it down a little bit. And you'll see it kind of wants to ride over each other. Keep that in mind when you're doing it. That last little bit, we make sure that it's not over top of each other. If you're out tying it and you're just doing it 1,000 times a day, it is not as big a deal because it is so much stronger than every other knot. And I've tied a million clinch knots and I've never had a problem ever. And so, I mean, I break a line every year or so, whatever. But this one is very, very strong. Even if it crosses over, it still won every single race. The only time it didn't win is when we were doing a knot to knot challenge of a uni knot to a uni knot. That was the only time it didn't do well, but we were able to keep it and watch that doubled up. This knot almost like makes itself a glued in knot when you're using braid. It's a really cool knot for braid. It works super awesome and it ties very nice and tight. It's easy to tie and it's a small light knot that amazingly holds up for everything. All the way through our lines, it was very, very strong and making it our #1 winner. And again, that's how we tested it, was on that. It was our #1 knot and the knot I think everybody should be tying now, just in the test we did, but definitely recommend taking yours and testing it and making sure it's working for you. So as always, guys, have a great day. Please like and share. Leave comments down at the bottom. Tell me what you'd like to see. If you want me to test another knot or something else that needs to be in there, we can always go through that. Or if you want to have something else, maybe you want to test a certain ammo or whatever it might be, give me a holler, guys, and let me know. And please watch our next video, our second video on fishing knots, where we get into snell knots and some of the other mono to braid knots. So as always, guys, have a great day.